So I don't know if you know where Hosea is in the Bible. It's found in the Old Testament. And if you don't really know where that is in the Bible, that's okay too. The Old Testament takes up most of the Bible, and Hosea is toward the end of the Old Testament. And it's one of the minor prophets. Hosea is an actual person. He's a man, and this book is about him and what God has commissioned him to do and say to God's people. And so I don't know if you know much about any prophets in the Bible, but there's no prophet in the entire Bible that chose to be a prophet. They weren't like, pick me. I would love to be the one to do the thing that you're going to ask the people to do, or to do for the people. And Hosea is a prophet that God spoke to. And this is the crazy thing that God asks Hosea to do. He asks Hosea, he doesn't ask Hosea, he tells Hosea to do this thing. Hosea, go and marry a woman who is a prostitute. In some versions of the Bible, it says a woman of whoredom or harlotry. Go marry a woman of whoredom and have children with her. And I want you to tell my people, the people of Israel, tell the people that this is how my relationship looks like with them. By this time in the Old Testament, God's people have just royally messed everything up over and over and over again. And God is always approaching his people, trying to figure out a way to help them understand how much he loves them and what he's just asking them to do, and how badly they fail at it. Over and over and over. He's trying to get the attention of his people, and they just continue to ignore him and do what they want to do and worship idols, and they do it just at the drop of the hat. This all started in the garden with Adam and Eve. So this is just a continuation of what our human race started in the garden. So the people here now, in God's people that are in the book of Hosea that God is directing this to, are no different than Adam and Eve, and they're no different than we are today. God is still speaking to his people through this exact story today. So for Hosea to do this, I don't know if any of you are married, or you have been married, or you want to be married one day. Tullian and I would never tell any of our 5 children to go and marry a spouse that is for sure unfaithful. Like, why don't you pick someone that's just going to sleep around? Pick someone that's unfaithful. Do that so that you will understand how God loves you. Like, go see how hard it is to stay with somebody who is unfaithful. Would anybody choose that? Would anybody choose to tell their children that, or for themselves? You've waited, maybe you've stayed a virgin, and you've gotten a great job and education, and you've set yourself up because you want to be a spouse one day. And then God comes and tells you, now this is what I want you to do. And I want you to do this for me. This is for me and for my people, and I need you to do this. That is a crazy idea. That's a crazy thing for him to suggest, let alone tell someone to go do. Does anybody agree with that? It's insane. But he wants him to do this because God has already shown himself to his people all throughout the Old Testament by this point to be a shepherd, to be a king, to be, what else? Shepherd, king, and none of this is enough. None of this is enough for them to understand and grasp what that really means for them. And so God's like, I want you to understand a marriage relationship, because this is a horizontal relationship that we can relate to more so than a father. That was the other thing I was going to say. A father. A father is an easy one. We all of us have a father. We all have parents, so we can easily understand a father-parent child relationship. We can understand that. We can understand a king and his kingship and his throne and obeying. We can understand that. We can understand a shepherd, and he's just looking at stupid sheep, because he's like, we understand what a shepherd does. But to understand what a husband does, what a spouse does, how all that a spouse does is so self-sacrificing constantly to the point of death. You are dying to yourself in your marriage if you are in one, and you would benefit by doing that, and your spouse would benefit. Your marriage will benefit if you were both willing to one-way love one another. And this is what God wants Hosea to show through his own earthly marriage. This is not like a figurative marriage. He says, I want you to actually do this. I need to shock my people. I need them to see how crazy this is, that I, the God of the universe, chose a bride that is a harlot, that is a woman of whoredom. Now, we're not just talking about females here, okay? This is God's people in general. He is giving them a feminine quality here. He's not saying that this only applies to women. This is to his church, his bride. The bride of Christ is how it's mentioned in the Bible over and over and over. And so to Jesus is coming to rescue his bride. That's what we hear. We hear these whispers of that all throughout the Old Testament. And so God is trying to paint this picture so that people really understand what that means. So Hosea does. He goes and he takes the woman Gomer that God points out. You're going to marry Gomer. And P.S., a little side note, just for the nerds in the room. Hosea means salvation. The name Hosea means salvation. And the name Gomer means, does anybody know?
No.
You don't know?
No.
Well, I figured you would know if anybody would know. It means perfected. It means finished. So she has been perfectly sinful, for sure. We already know that. But there's something about their relationship that is going to be perfected that we have yet to see. And so Hosea takes Gomer, and they actually have one child together. In all of the versions of the Bible, their first child is actually Hosea's. Hosea was given a son. And then their next two children that they have, she has with her other lovers. And God proceeds to name these children in a way that is also terrible. He tells them what to name them, and their names in the original language mean no mercy and not my people. So everybody in here, if you are looking for some baby names, these are some, you can throw those in the mix. But these are terrible names, but it is to show, God is an illustrative preacher, and he does no different in this story. He actually asks Hosea to live a parable. In the New Testament, Jesus talks a lot in these parables and these stories, and you're like, he's trying to show heavenly truths using earthly examples that we can understand. The parable of the prodigal son, you've heard of these parables, different parables. The workers in the vineyard, all these different parables are earthly illustrations of heavenly truths. And Hosea is actually going to be a real live earthly illustration of a heavenly truth, not just in story, but in real life. And so God is telling them, instructing him all the while what to do. Your wife is going here, go after her. Your wife is gone again, go after her. Your wife is looking over there, go after her. Turn her gaze towards you. He just pursues and pursues and pursues. And I don't know about you, but Hosea, now he's not Jesus. I understand that. But he had some serious God energy working through him to go back to this woman and get her every single time. Has anybody in here ever been cheated on? Even if you've never been married, have you just had someone be unfaithful to you once, let alone multiple times over the course of your relationship, or multiple times in a day or two? Any unfaithfulness, having to deal with any unfaithfulness, whatever it looks like, specifically when it comes to romantic love, where it's the most intimate of ways, it is one of the most painful things that we could ever experience. And it's not just painful for the person who is the perpetrator, but also the victim. It's painful for both of them. It's painful for both of them in different ways. And so God is trying to illustrate like this crazy love that he loves us with. loves his people with through Hosea and Gomer's relationship. And so it goes on, and she's running, and he goes back, and he goes to get her over and over and over. And I remember reading this story in my 20s in a Bible study I was doing. And I remember thinking, I'm a lot like Hosea. And, I'd be out. Like, I could probably marry someone like Gomer, and I could probably stick it out, but I'll never be like Gomer. I mean, that's obviously painting a picture of somebody that is not me. Until it was. I've been married now 3 times. Tullian is my 3rd husband. I've been divorced twice. And my first husband, I married at the age of 20. And I was bound and determined to never be divorced. Divorce riddled my family of origin. And if I tried to count a few weeks ago, like all of the divorces that have happened in my family, my mother's side of the family that I know of, and it's dozens. It's a lot of divorce. That I come from a very well-worn pattern of divorce. And so I was bound and determined to never, ever, ever be put in that category. Like, it was everything I could do to try to avoid that. And so I got married, and no matter what the circumstances were going to be or would turn out to be, I was determined to stay in that marriage. And about 11 years into that marriage, I cheated. I was the one. I was the Gomer. I was the one that cheated. And then I married that affair. I married the person that I had an affair with. And then after 5 years of marriage, he cheated, and he divorced me. So now I had this picture of both cheating, being cheated on, and being Gomer and feeling like Hosea, and understanding something about the book of Hosea that I had never understood before. And it broke me in all the best ways, because it humbled me and pointed to the person I'm supposed to identify with in the story, which is Gomer, as we all are supposed to identify with. We'll unpack that more. But it was hard. It was a hard pill to swallow, but it was also good medicine, because I needed to know that. And I needed to know that I did have a Hosea that loved me. I did have a Hosea that was a perfect spouse for me, that pursued me and covered my scarlet letter. So I remember feeling like the weight of that scarlet letter and thinking, I'm so embarrassed now. I'm so ashamed. I'm so unworthy of anybody else like ever looking at me, especially after 2 divorces. Even though I wasn't the one that cheated in my second marriage, how embarrassing. Now I've been divorced twice. I'm clearly a faulty wife. Something is wrong with me. I'm not going to be desirable to anybody. I'm not going to be worthy of being married again. And it was even hard to fathom that God could renew anything, do something new in my life, or new in that area, specifically in marriage. And so after 4 years of being single for the first time as an adult, which if anybody's single in here, God bless you. Okay, as an adult, not as a young person, Hallie, on your phone, single, not that kind of single, but adult single. Hallie's one of my basketball girls from Jupiter Christian, and she's visiting today with her mom, Judy, so you guys give her a shout out afterwards. She's one of my faves. I was almost paralyzed for a while, for about a year after that second divorce, which was a good thing because it kept me like in a place where God had me. It kind of kept me in a wilderness that was where I needed to be. And until I met Tullian, and that was almost exactly 4 years after that second divorce. And what was funny, and we laugh about this often when we were able to tell people, is that those 4 years, I made this list of Anyway, I heard some chuckles, so somebody else made their list. So I made this list of like all of these things that were like going to be like, this is what kind of man God is going to bring me. And like, these are the attributes that I know he will have and that I know that we will connect. These are the ways we'll be compatible. And I think that that list kept me, weeding people out. And then when I met Tullian in person, it blew most of that entire list apart. It didn't even matter anymore. He had the first three, and they were the primary things that mattered. And one of the first ones was he had to be a specific kind of Christian, because I grew up in Texas, and so everybody there is Christian. And so it's really difficult to have a conversation with somebody about Jesus and their faith when they've gone to church every Sunday of their lives and they still don't know what they're talking about. I was about to say some bad words, but I spared Hallie. But so it was a specific kind of Christian. And one of the reasons that was number one was because I had listened to every sermon that he had preached and was reading his books and reading and listening to people he was pointing to. So I knew like this is not going to work unless theologically somebody and I are very, very compatible and think the same way. And then the second most important thing was that he had to be broken in all of the ways that would complement my brokenness so that he would understand me and I would understand him. I had a lot of men that were, late 30s, early 40s, because that was the age I was. I was around 36 to 40 when I was single. And a lot of men were like, I've never been married and I don't have any kids, so I don't have any baggage. And I was like, sweetheart, you do. You do have baggage. You have no idea what it is, but you have baggage and I don't want any of it, okay? So, and number three was I wanted him to, whoever this man, should God bring me a man, I wanted him to have kids because I wanted him to understand the part of me that is a mother, and I wanted a bigger family. So Tullian met those top three things, and one of the most precious ways God has redeemed those two first marriages and those divorces and the pain and the heartache that has caused, and still I suffer today from the consequences of that. Just because my life circumstances are better doesn't mean that I don't suffer consequences still, and the consequences are heartbreaking. And but one of the redeeming ways God shows me that he loves me still is that he has used all of that, specifically to love Tullian through his own experience of divorce and just his life falling apart. By the time I met him, my life had fallen apart a couple times. So I had some road experience. I had traveled down some of the roads and could point out some of the potholes for him. And that kind of made our broken pieces match up pretty perfectly. And so I'm thankful for that, because that's been a beautiful, redeeming story for my heart and mind that God has allowed me to even be a part of, which is amazing. But it doesn't stop there. This is not where Hosea, this is not just a book about marriage in general, our earthly marriage, and just for people who want to be married or are married. This is a book for humans, for God's people to hear. This is a book for his nation of Israel. When it says Israel in the Bible, it's referring to God's people. God's people, Christians, that's what we call them in modern day, Christians. This is a book for all Christians. This is a book for people married or single, old, young. This is a book for you to understand God's love for you through the relationship of marriage. Because from Genesis to Revelation, all themes of the Bible are actually wrapped in this relationship of marriage, of God to his people. And it's beautiful. And if you start to kind of see that thread through the entire Bible, you go, whoa, that blows my mind. And so I started understanding that this was not just about earthly marriage and how I've failed to perform or I have done well at being a wife. This was more about the vertical. We always talk about the vertical and the horizontal in here. And the horizontal is person to person. It's down here on earth. It's where we get dust on our feet. Vertical is between us and God. And my relationship with God is, if you're a new Christian or if you think about your relationship with God as a marriage, as his people, do you think that you've been faithful to God? Because I did think I had been faithful to God until I realized I had not been, that I had been a part of this unfaithfulness as a spouse, as a betrothed person to him, as a body of people to him, that I've been unfaithful. How was I unfaithful? It's all about idolatry. My adultery with God is all about my idolatry to other things less than him, other people, places, and things that I put first, that I put primary, whether it was something that is even good. As you all know, and you hear week in and week out here, we can make good things into idols. We can make good, God-given things into idols, like spouses, like children, like parents, like friends, like education, performance, your bank account. All of these things that we have that are good can become idols, and we can abuse them, and we can put them above God. And so this picture of Hosea and his wife going off over and over and over to these lesser loves, these people that are not her husband, that she is giving herself to, selling herself to. We do that every day. We do that every day in some way. And a lot of the times, we do it in the name of God. We do it in the name of our church. We can put ministry above God. That's not the same thing. We can put church above God. That's also not the same. That's not equated to God. We can put our quiet times and all of the things that we do to draw closer to God, or we can put that above God. We can make it more about us. We can make these good things into idols. And so but the easy ones are money and power, control. Those are a little more subtle sometimes because we can try to control our day. If we're a really regimented person, I don't know a more creature of habit than my husband, Tullian. And sometimes, not him, this has nothing to do with him, but sometimes people are so regimented that becomes their God. Like that, they cannot divert. They cannot get out of that structure that they have because they want to complete it. They want to check the boxes in the way that they want to. And that can become more important. And we can become a slave to these things. What are you a slave to? If you just had to answer really quick, what things do you think you might be in bed with, metaphorically? What things do you really cuddle up with? And maybe it's social media. Maybe it's what you look like on social media. Maybe it's where your rank is in your family or your friends or your coworkers, where you are on the ladder at work. Are you compromising yourself so that you can get further or do this or do that? Or your looks, vanity is a huge idol. Like where are the idols that cause you to be unfaithful to God in this way? Because we have them and we act on them consciously and unconsciously. And that's the scary part, right? That's the scary part because we really think we're being a good person and a good Christian, and we don't see ourselves as this unfaithful Gomer towards God, but we are. And in chapter 2, there's this part where Gomer she's been gone so long, she's gone so far and so long that Hosea hasn't seen her in a while. And God says, go again and go get your wife. Go buy her back. Go again. She's been way out in the wilderness. She's off doing whatever she wants to do to satisfy her flesh, to satisfy her cravings, to satisfy whatever she's trying to do. She's gone off the deep end, and she's been gone a long time. And God says, go buy her back. Go get her back and bring her back home to you and love her. Like, just, again, go get her. And Tullian and I he was actually talking to his mom a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned this quote that I've heard him say before. And it's actually a quote that comes from a novel, and it's by Bruce Marshall. It's a novel by Bruce Marshall. And in the novel, there's a character, and he is a pastor, Father Smith. And Father Smith is walking down the street, and there is a prostitute on the street. And Father Smith and this prostitute have a talk because she's a skeptic of religion and God, and she has questions for him. And so he's like, you can walk with me to my next appointment, and I'll answer questions. And so they walk along, and she's asking questions. And one of the things that he tells her within their conversation is, every man that knocks on the door of a brothel is looking for God. And so when you think about every door of whatever our brothel, our metaphorical brothels, whatever those are that we're going to look for acceptance, to look for love, to look for validation, to look for forgiveness, to look for something to appease our flesh in some way, we're really looking for God. That's what we're really looking for in those moments. And so Gomer is like this perfect picture of our propensity, our perpetual chronic illness, this sin sickness that we deal with, that we go and we go and we go. And we go looking and we find it. We're looking for it. It's the keys in the pocket story that he tells all the time, which some of you don't know that, and I'm not going to say it, but you can watch him online and you can see it. But we're looking for something we already have. We're always looking for something that we already have. And so Gomer sells herself out. She has become a slave, which is what we do to our idols. We become enslaved to them. And in this culture, in this time period, when a town was going to have an auction, and it was very common for them to auction off people, slaves. That was very common, especially women, because they were pretty low on the totem pole there. No women's feminism going on in that era. And so if you were Gomer, and you were going to be sold into slavery because whoever you had been with, he's done with you, so he's just going to get whatever he can, get what's left of you, and sell you. You were stripped naked, and you were in the middle of the town center, whatever that might be, and you were usually in a cage because you are property. You're like livestock. And so she would have only had her eyelids, basically, to cover her just from seeing the shame of like where she is and what she's become. And for Hosea to show up, it's showing up publicly in a town that his wife, the mother of at least one of his sons and other children that Gomer has had, is naked, being sold as a slave in the town square. And the bidding starts. And Hosea is not a wealthy man. There's nothing in here about him being a wealthy man or being a man of money and means. And the bidding starts, and it goes up and up. And he actually throws in some shekels plus some other things like grains and some other goods that he has, because obviously he didn't have enough money to just buy her with the money. He had to supplement with and I got this and this and this. But so he's giving everything he has to buy her back, to buy back his wife, who was already his wife, to buy back his betrothed, his love. And how humiliating that must have been for him to be in a bidding war, first of all, in the situation with his barren, probably very ragged-looking wife who is spent. And I can only imagine her thinking, I cannot believe that he's here. I cannot believe that he's the one that's bidding on me. Is he doing this because he just wants to buy me and then punish me? Is he wanting to, hurt me further because I've betrayed him so terribly? And Hosea is up, buying, bidding, and I can't imagine the embarrassment that he has, the embarrassment she has, the shame, and just when he wins the bid and takes her home, for her to know that I want you to come home with me, and we're going to be together. You're my beloved. It's not just me. We're a we, and I'm taking you with me, and it's not to punish you. I can't imagine how Gomer felt. I would have been crying forever, weeping for weeks. But that's really the most beautiful picture. I told Tullian last night, James Boyce wrote a book. I know he wrote several books, but one of the books he wrote was about Hosea. And he says chapter 3 of Hosea is the most powerful chapter in the entire Bible. It's pretty strong words. But one reason he says that is because of this whole scene, because it's really the scene of us being bought back by our bridegroom, our Jesus. And really, it's even better than what was in here. It's even better than what was in Hosea, because he's the one that took our place of shame. We didn't have to stand in the town square, stripped, naked, being shown that we're enslaved, and let everybody start the bidding. What he did for us was even better than what Hosea had to go through. He took our place there. He was stripped naked. He was the one that bore the guilt and wore the scarlet letter, my scarlet letter, your letter of unfaithfulness to him, all your letters of whatever it is that you know that come to mind that you know plagues you, those things that call you out to them, those people, places, and things that are less than God. He died as though that were him. He died as if he were you, that if he was your level of unfaithfulness, my level of unfaithfulness, all of it combined, he died as his bride, his betrothed, his unfaithful betrothed. He died as that. He died as a thief. So he did that for us in the person of Jesus. And then what does he do but then die for us, to forgive us, to give us all of that back, to clothe us, to love us, to promise us an eternal home, an eternal place of love that is unfathomable to us this side of heaven. Like, we can talk about it, but we cannot imagine a place without graves, a place without unfaithfulness, a place without any idols, anything that we're struggling with, struggles and addictions. We can't understand a place free of that, because that's what we're in, and we've always been it, and we will until our bridegroom comes back again. It's a beautiful story, and if you can read the whole book of Hosea, I strongly encourage you to do it and just see how amazing the love of God for us is. There is a story that, let me get over here to it. There's a story that I wanted to share about. I asked Tullian again, he's my main resource, obviously, for sermon prep. There's a story that is about this young couple, and the wife, they're in a hospital room, and the wife has had a facial nerve removed. And there's a couple people in the room, and the husband and the wife are there. And, you know, she's distorted her mouth, her face now is distorted. And she was like, is it always going to be this way? And he was like, yeah, like it's going to be this, it's going to be like that now. You're going to have this weird, awkward, you know, paralysis, distorted kiss. And the husband says, I like it. And he contorts his mouth to kiss hers in the way that it's distorted. And it was just such a beautiful picture of how God has done that in the person of Jesus for us. He sent his only son into the world to become human, something that is so beneath him, something that is so far less than what he is ultimately and what he has to be, something that suffers, something that sacrifices. And this is what he did for us. He contorted himself to our deformity, our sin sickness, our chronic illness of unfaithfulness. He distorted himself so that he could get us back and remind us that we're loved and that we're his forever. He is never going to give us up. It's like Saint Rick Astley's very popular song, Never Gonna Give You Up kind of love. Never gonna let you down. Like, he is never gonna give you up. He is your bridegroom. And when Jesus comes back and receives his church, all of us, it is gonna be like everybody in here, weddings are so common, most everybody in here has been to a wedding. And at those weddings where you saw the groom standing there waiting for that first look at his bride coming, and you see him, waiting patiently, and then you can see the emotion, hopefully, on his face of she's unless he's trying to be real stoic and he's about to pass out, but where he is just absolutely overwhelmed with emotion because there she is. There's his bride. This is what God will see when we arrive with Jesus. This is what Jesus is. This is how God sees us, because Jesus has clothed us in this beautiful coat of righteousness, a clean, stain-free garment that is always ours, that is not ever going anywhere. And when he sees us for the first time, because he has given us that is how he sees us all. That's how God sees us all the time, because Jesus already gave us that. We don't get to experience it fully until Jesus comes back, but that's what we get. That's what he sees every time he looks at us. Not our scarlet letters, not the idols that we struggle with, not the secrets that we keep, not those things that we hide. That's what he sees. When he looks at us, he sees what Jesus has done for us. He sees the beauty that he has made us into, that we are blemish free. And I pray that you would remember that today, that you would think about your life as it has been and will be. Whatever may come, that's still covered. It's rest assured that that's all taken care of. It is finished. That is what we hang our hat on here, because it is the only thing we can hang our hat on. It is finished. I hope that when you think about God's perfect love for us in Jesus, that you will remember the story of Hosea, and God loved him for what he had him do. And although that you have lived a life of Gomer, your Gomerness, all your Gomerness, you are a spotless bride of Christ. You are part of that body. And there's nothing that you can do to undo that. Let's pray.